what do we think is what acquired means, right? Is it something material or is it immaterial? And what does it mean to lose something? Because his whole goal was try to make the deadline. You know, he was deadline focused. He made the deadline.
Yeah.
So in many ways, he didn't lose time. He didn't lose 9. So materially, he did what he set out to do. Yet that thought feels unreliable and disingenuous because of all the things that could have been lost.
Yeah.
All right. Hi, everybody. This is Laura Yu. I'm here with my friends Sylvia Lee and Kofi Adisa. And today we are going to be talking about Dave Eggers' novel called The Parade. But before we get to that, we have really exciting news. Our our bookish episode on James was awarded an honorable mention in the AVA Digital Awards, which is an international competition. And our producer, Matthew Jackson, also got an honorable mention. So, yay!
Yay! Nothing but talent. Talent on top of talent.
This room is bursting with talent.
So on with today's discussion. So The Parade is a very short novel by Eggers, and the premise is we find 2 characters in the beginning of the novel who show up in an unnamed country, and their job is to finish this road connecting 2 major cities or 2 places in this state, also unnamed. The characters are named. They're just simply called 4 and 9, and adventure ensues. But one thing we're going to try to do is not give away the ending, and we'll kind of explain some of that. So who would like to dive in?
I'm going to start with the ending.
So what had happened is...
So when they get to... the novel is interesting because it really is kind of this meditation that the character 4, who is charged with actually laying down these yellow stripes, and his interaction with this guy 9, whose job is to go ahead and make certain that people are cleared off. So you have this paver, and then you have this, subordinate. And, you also have these groups of people who kind of sit on the sideline yet interact. And it's kind of an interesting journey. And it's for it to be short, it's also slow, but so is the paving of a road. And so but it's not like it's a slow going novel. There's things that are happening. But I think that one of the things that I remember noting, because I left my version on Delta when I was flying back from San Diego.
What's the flight number?
Maybe if Delta personnel are listening, my name is in my book. But yeah, the thing that made the novel interesting to me, and I know there are some reviews that are not favorable, was that there's this sort of narrative arc that I see happening with 4, because he starts off kind of one way. He has this grudging relationship with 9, who seems a little more carefree and not as focused on the job at hand. And then when 9 gets, in a serious situation that he finds himself in, you see a kind of turn with 4, but then he kind of turns back in a way that you can appreciate, but also question a little bit more. That's how I remember. I mean, then you have the characters like Medallion, Cousin, and then you had these people who are kind of like symbols of something, but I wasn't quite sure where this was. And I kept wondering if 9 was indeed the actual president, and that he was basically like impersonating somebody and just testing, because no one could be that outlandish in my mind. And then once the real conflict occurred, and I was like, oh, maybe he's not the real president.
You mean like that show Undercover Boss or something?
Yeah, like Undercover Boss. Yeah, I thought it was like a retelling of that.
I didn't think of that.
But luckily, I was pleasantly wrong.
Did we mention that the country that they're in, paving, like they've been hired by an external contractor, and the country is recovering from a really apparently horrendous civil war, and they're sort of remnants of that, like, you know, what happens to a nation state after, you know, in the direct aftermath of the war, right? There's a lot of rebuilding, a lot of money-making opportunity. And so this is where this company that is paving this road was hired by the government to essentially connect the South and the North region, the capital, together with kind of the more rural areas so that there could be a lot more development occurring and, you know, one would assume like healing taking place. And apparently even the way that the rebels and the government, like they came back together was apparently very positive, I guess, considering. But, you know, I thought that part was really interesting because in the aftermath of a war, when there are really no, like things are kind of a little chaotic, you don't know who to trust. And that seemed to be the premise of 4's entire existence was do not engage with the locals. You cannot trust anyone because then they'll be on you for more money or this or that or whatever. So don't make any personal connections with anybody. You have a job, you're paid to do a job, you do your job, and then you leave. And that seemed to be his MO. And the 9 is there as the typical literary foil to that, where he's just sort of like gallivanting with all the locals.
Right.
And the funny thing was like, I was not that surprised that 9 was that way because I feel like I've known people like that.
Right.
Where it's like you have, and I think I'm more, maybe a little bit more like 4, where I'm like just kind of like, all right, if I'm doing a job, I just want to do my job.
Right.
Leave me alone. Let me do my job. But I've known people like 9
who are there for the full experience.
Yeah. And in my spirit, I'm more like 9. Like, I want to try the local foods. Like, I want to go out and, like, you know,
meet people and stuff.
And, you know, have adventures and frolic in the lake. I don't want typhoid, but I just want to, like, you know, have fun. But, you know, the character of 9 was a very familiar one for me because I feel like I've known people like that. Where I'm like, it must be so nice to be you.
Right.
You have no rules. You have no obligations. And you can just do whatever you want.
And then when you get into trouble, a 4 is going to come along and help you out or save you.
Yeah, because
that's part of it.
That's what it is. 9 reminds me of the youngest sibling. And I am that. In real life, I'm a youngest sibling. They're carefree. They have no sense of responsibility sometimes. And your elder sibling will come and bail you out if you get arrested or whatever. You know, they won't tell mom or dad. They'll come and like help you.
Yeah, and the scene with the little boy is sort of the precursor to that, right?
Yep.
So he sees this child in the midst of paving, knowing that there's no parent around, you know, and
9 is nowhere to be seen.
9 is gallivanting from wherever he is, and so he does the responsible thing for her, and which is part of his character, but also breaking part of his code. You know, he has to interact because he feels some kind of compulsion that, you know, if something happens to this kid, you know, and in a lot of ways, when he has these moments, he's thinking about how this is going to reflect on him and his way of thinking. But then there's these other moments where you get to see a part of him that was kind of hidden, like when he plays the recording. And this is what he's listening to before he goes.
Like his humanity.
He's human, after all.
I think the 4's character did make me think a lot about, because I think these 2 guys are identified as being foreigners. Like they're not from that country that they're paving in. And it made me think about, you know, soldiers, but also like journalists or photojournalists who go into these places to capture, document, and do the job that they're there to do. And often, even when they see something terrible, right, they can't or don't, can't intervene, right? So it made me think of, recently I watched a movie called Civil War with Kirsten Dunst, I think is her name. It was not what I thought it was going to be about, but so it was interesting. But anyway,
was she a photographer in that movie?
Yeah.
She was the photojournalist, right? And so it was about that. They're there to document this Civil War, imagined American Civil War. What's interesting is like in that synopsis, California and Texas are on one side together. It was interesting. But the whole thing was about capturing without intervening, right?
Clearly it's fiction.
And how hard that is, right? It's in a way denying some, no matter how like focused and whatever you are, I think you do have to repress sort of what is for most people some natural tendency want to help or to like be curious and engaged and so on. So it's kind of takes a kind of a repression of your humanity to serve in some of these functions.
Yeah.
And I did read in an interview that Dave Eggers' inspiration for this book came from, he visited South Sudan in 2014, I think. And there was actually a company building a road in Sudan after Civil War. And it was not American, actually, but Swedish. A Swedish company was building this road. And he said, you know, that most readers, especially American readers, obviously will read this and assume that it's about America, right? That those workers are American construction, you know, all of that capitalism, all of that good stuff is in there. And he talks about how Americans sort of fall into two camps. One is where they think everything is about America and America is amazing and awesome. And then the other part is those people also think everything is about America, but they're guilty about everything that America does.
Interesting.
And I thought that was an interesting like perspective. And it made me question, like after the fact, because I read this a while ago, like what did I think about it? Like was I feeling that sort of nationalistic guilt? Or was that right? Like, what did I think about where our place or the reader's place is in the novel?
In preparation for this episode, I did refresh, like I speed read through like some of it, and I was like, oh yeah. Some of the things that stood out to me, and I remember actually that's interesting because at the end, I think the ending revealed to me what I had been thinking the whole time. We're not going to spoil the ending, as we said, but the ending is really the payoff for the book in so many different ways. But for me, at the end, I realized that I did not think that they were American. I thought that they were Western, but not American. I thought they were like a neutral. Like, I felt like they were a neutral party, I guess. Neutral, I say that in quotes, but...
Like Sweden?
I didn't think Sweden, but I think I was thinking, thinking Switzerland because we think
I meant Switzerland.
Switzerland. So that's kind of what I was thinking at the end because of sort of what happens. And again, going back to what you said about Four's humanity... This is his 63rd job, is what he says, or something to that effect.
Yeah.
But this was Nine's first.
Yes.
Right. And so the stark contrast between how the two of them are, what I interpreted throughout was like an emotional guarding. So like Four is there to do a job and he has a contract and he's very concerned about upholding the contract and what have you. But also part of it is I think he's protecting himself. Because in those 63 jobs that he's done for countries in all stages of upheaval or restoration, I think he's seen some pretty heinous things. And so I think it requires him to just sort of keep a stoic sense about himself. And then at the end, very similarly, there is no sort of response. It's just what happens, happens. It is what it is. And even though it's like, for me as a reader, I'm like, it's heartbreaking, like the one detail that you have, you know, where it kind of drives home, like how sad it is, like whatever it is, how emotional it is. I think that's why you don't know a lot about him and he doesn't reveal a lot. And then even when he allows himself to sort of start to have like a connection with some of the locals, I think you know now why he doesn't, you know? And so to me, I was like, oh, that's why, but can you ever really be a neutral party?
Right.
And this is sort of what I was left with at the end of it.
I think too, I mean, all of that's great, Sylvia. I think too that when you have, I mean, there are certain details that let you know that, at least let me know that, okay, they're not in a, they're clearly strangers in a strange land. And Four has to sleep with a gun and a knife and all of this. So clearly he understands the threat in these spaces. Yeah. And he understands it in a way that is personal and probably visceral. And one of the reasons why he doesn't make those sort of human connections the way you would think. But it's also interesting that when we first meet Nine, he's,
already made a human connection.
Yeah, he's already made a human connection, and he seems to like to do the human connecting a lot. And he comes off from at least Four's point of view as irresponsible, but maybe he was being more responsible in terms of humanity. Now, it didn't help him. Yeah. I mean, he got himself into a predicament, which, because Four understood that, he sees this as this was avoidable. Yeah. But once it becomes apparent that now you're going to be ransomed or you got to go through these different things. That made me think, well, this can't be in an American context.
Right.
It had to be in another, because ransoming people is something that happens in failed state communities or where there are narco drug lords. Or I was watching something and Fat Joe relayed, it was on Shannon Sharp's thing, where he relayed that he was at a concert and they couldn't leave. He was in one of those countries in Africa because the warlord wouldn't let them leave.
What?
So they were basically held hostage. I think it was him and another person. It may have been DMX. So it was a while ago, and and so when you're in these which is the two oddest people to be held hostage in all the odd places. But it's one of those things where when you're in these types of spaces, that's what made me think that, okay, this isn't necessarily an American context.
Right.
And I wasn't actually sure racially what they
Same.
were.
Interesting.
Same.
Yeah.
Because I was like, these people could be Asian.
Right.
4-9 could be maybe, I don't know about 9, but, and I thought the same thing of the other inhabitants of the country that they were in. Like, it could be African, it could be Middle East, it could be so many other different, different races or ethnicities. One thing that struck me, though, was the fact that had 9, I kind of going back to what you were saying, like, had 9 not gotten into some of the stuff he had gotten into, which 4 did seem like it was avoidable. And yet, because of that connection, he was able to finish the road.
Yeah.
The people actually helped him finish the road, which I think lends to the irony of the ending. But
Yes.
For sure. But I was just kind of left there thinking, I just had a lot of questions. Not all of them were answered, but I think that's okay. Usually I would be unsatisfied with that, but I was okay because I think somewhere deep down, kind of like with 4 and then like I kind of know the answer. Like, for example, one of the details in the book is that as they're like paving the road, they see a lot of the countryside. They see different, types of landscapes and figures and, bombed out like shelters or plane husks and things like that, remnants of the war. One kind of repeated feature they see throughout are these black garbage bags.
Right.
And like they're piled up in mountains in some places. And he's always like, doesn't know what's in the garbage bags. And in a conversation with one of the, local men who's helping him with something, he asks about it. And I think the phrasing is like, it's the waste of war.
Yes.
It's the waste from the war. And then he said, like, on a related note, like, how does one go to university in your... right? So, and then 4 pauses and says, he's like, oh, well, you can do this or whatever. He's like, but how is that related to the black garbage bags?
Right.
And he says, well, once again, it's just because it's all the waste of war. And I thought to myself, oh, so, really Eggers is leaving up to your imagination. And I was thinking, what do I know about the history of war, right? Who are the first to go? Right, the intellectuals, right? What are the first things they do? Burn the books, right? They burn the histories or the oral tradition, whatever it is. They'll burn all of that down. So I was thinking to myself, oh, I see like the black garbage bags as this metaphor, right? What is the waste of war, right? Your imagination begins to fill those garbage bags with all of that, which I thought was a really interesting literary device.
Yeah,
and some of these like the absence of specific details, right? Like sort of speak to that. It's, as we were talking about before, it is often, the novel is often referred to as an allegory or a fable or a parable even. So I think that's sort of absence of naming things. It sort of creates that kind of a feeling in the novel that it's like a fable, like, right? One thing, I keep wanting to talk about the ending, but I can't. Okay, but towards the end of the novel, there was one sentence that really stuck with me. And it is very, very towards the end. And he says, this is 4 thinking, I guess, he had acquired nothing and lost nothing. And, you as the reader, I as a reader, I read that and think, well, that's not true, right? That can't be right. So then it's supposed to, like, at that moment, make me think about what did he lose and what did he gain? And I think, I thought about, is there an experience where nothing happens, right? There is no loss. And especially an experience like this, right? But is there a human interaction, human, experience that where it's neutral. There's nothing lost, nothing gained. And I don't know if that's true. And then, of course, the very ending, I think, will prove that he's wrong about that, right?
Right.
Yeah.
And then I guess it's also depending on, to your point, Sylvia, is like, what do we think is what acquired means, right? Is it something material or is it immaterial? And what does it mean to lose something?
Yeah.
Because his whole goal was try to make the deadline. You know, he was deadline focused. He made the deadline.
Yeah.
So in many ways, he didn't lose time. Nope. He didn't lose 9.
Nope.
So materially,
he did
what he set out to do. Yet that thought feels unreliable and disingenuous because of all the things that could have been lost.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All the things. Well, they never. I don't think they found that buggy that 9 was supposed to.
They lost a vehicle.
They lost the vehicle.
But you're right. Like nothing gained, nothing lost in that sense.
But it also made, 4 is kind of moving the goalpost in a way because they finished on time. And, 9 says, well, we're on time. And 4 says, I want it to be early.
Yes.
Right? So he wanted to be on time, but no, really, he wanted to be early. Right? So that even the achieving of the goal is not satisfying. No. Right? And early, how early?
Well, why did he want to be early, though?
Right.
To be with his family.
Right.
Because he told them, okay, I think I can finish this early, and then they're expecting him back. But you're right, it just feels a little I like the word disingenuous that you use.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah. All of it. He met his goals.
Yes.
For all intents and purposes.
Which is, for him, in terms of his character, is the achievement.
Yeah.
Right? But it seems like a hollow achievement.
Yes. Yeah.
It's, okay, you finished it, but...
Now what?
Now what and at what cost?
Yeah.
Because there was a cost.
Yeah.
Maybe he didn't feel it.
Right.
And maybe to some degree 9 didn't feel it. But I'm imagining 9 did.
Well, I was wondering about what happened to 9.
Right.
Considering the ending. And I was curious, and I also had another question, do I think 4 would continue in this job? Would this be his last assignment, or would he take on another assignment? What do you guys think?
I think he would.
Yeah,
I think that's... I think so. Yeah, I think he probably wouldn't do it with 9. But he would definitely
I don't think he can do it with 9.
I don't think, I don't think 9 is going to be on anymore.
No, that's probably true, too. Yeah. But, I ended with the question, so what was actually the parade?
Yep.
And, you think of parades as a procession of people with usually lining the streets, welcoming and ushering in people who are supposed to be grand in some sort. And maybe that's not what the parade is.
Right.
Maybe the parade is something a little more challenging when you're thinking about power dynamics.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
It did make you think about all the different ways that we use that word parade, right? Yes, initially. And they say that is the goal of paving the road, to prepare the road, and it's going to be inaugurated basically by the presidential parade or whatever, from one part of the country to the other part of the country. But there are other meanings to what a parade could mean. So it did show different, multiple, elements of what a parade is.
Or when you have, what occasions, solicit a parade, right? You see it when, the royals get married, there's a parade, but you also see it when the royals die, there's a funeral parade procession. And you're right. I think it can. But you never really the way that it's not a procession. It's not a march. It is a parade, and so automatically I think it has positive connotations.
Yes, it's like a celebration.
Yeah, and I knew, but while I was reading it, I knew something was up. First of all, because it's but also there's this one story I think about the president and how his wife was basically murdered.
Yes.
And how even so he forgave and it was very generous and all this stuff, and I was like. I don't know if forgiveness is a characteristic I would assign to any despot ever.
Right.
But okay, whatever. And, as the thing goes on, you're like, oh, yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah.
And they do mention that more than once, right?
Yeah.
So that is a point of issue.
Yeah. And people are surprised and they're curious about it and they wonder at it. And I'm like,
And that also kind of portrays a kind of ignorance or innocence.
Yes. Which one?
Yeah. You don't know if, I mean, clearly there are rebel forces who dress, tacky and everything.
Yeah.
And then there are people who just appear like the guy with the aviator glasses. And he's on the plane towards the end. And so it's like if he's the inspector, right, then you wonder what the nature of all of this is. Yep. And when we do have parades, what are we really celebrating?
Right.
And usually, I mean, when you mention the royals, it usually is something powerful. Mm-hmm. It is something that is grandiose and holds some kind of cultural significance. And I think the characters that 4 and 9 interact with, there is a kind of hopefulness and a kind of almost like this idea that things are going to get better and reconciliation.
Yeah.
And, that's always hoped for.
Yeah.
It's not always realized, though.
In one of the reviews I read, it sort of summarized, I don't know, like a lesson. I don't want to use that word, but what's being explored. And I thought it was interesting the way the writer had set it up. Something about how it's considering the importance of pragmatism that is paired with compassion. That you make room for compassion in the pragmatism, which clearly is speaking to 4's character, and then generosity that needs to be girded by caution, right? And I thought, I really like the way that. Now I wish I remember who the reviewer was, but I liked it was a succinct way of describing the push and pull that 4 and 9 have, right? And also push and pull with their environment and the people who kind of show up in and out of that space, that sort of rejecting a kind of absolutism, right? Of being.
I like that a lot better I think one of the reviews I read used the word grim and cynical.
Well, that person definitely did not like this book.
No. But I can understand, like, the cynicism, right? Like, it could come across as that way, right? Like, they are giving you these glimpses of, like, hope and possibility only to, like, snatch it away, But I think I like how that person, that writer, which you could remember too, that writer had put it, like that there should be a caution, the caution undergirding generosity. And what was it? The pragmatism coupled with compassion. But those are from the points of view of people who are enacted upon in many ways, like when I think it is an apt description of cynicism about, like, power, right? And what happens in a vacuum of it or a totality of it. You know, the power is always going to be this thing that people are, trying to use and amass and leverage for some of their own goals or aims. You just hope that the aim is in your favor or positive for people versus personal vendettas and things like that. And it really depends. It's just a flip of the coin. Well, we hope you've enjoyed this episode of The Parade. It is a very short novel. You can read it in one sitting, and would we recommend?
Yeah, I do. Yeah.
If you want to give yourself a 2 sitting, you can do it 2
You can do a 2 sitting. The 1 sitting, leave that to the pros. But yeah, it is a short novel, really fascinating novel, and it raises a lot of questions, some of which we talked about. So we highly encourage you all to check it out. Yeah, and check us out. Us honorable mention award-winning Bookish anywhere you get your podcasts, or at Bookish, a casual book club.podbean.com or podbean.com/dragon podcasts, and you can find us at any of those venues. Please tune in next time. This has been Kofi, Laura, and Sylvia.
Or Goodbye. Sylvia, Laura, and Kofi.
Oh, all of this. And Matt. All right.
Bye, everyone.
Bye, everyone.
Bye-bye.
Thanks for listening to Dragon Podcasts. Connect with us at podbean.com/dragonpodcasts.